Part 26. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 251. Yunyani-R's voice is like a mosquito, so low that it can't be heard. This sound is soft and waxy, charming to the bone. Qin Mu directly picked up her slender and soft waist, and in a flash, he appeared in Viang Palace in the next moment. At this time, Xuanhuan was still in a daze in the inner hall of Viang Palace. First, she didn't know where she was going, and second, she didn't dare to leave without Qin Mu's order. But she said she was in a daze, but she was actually practicing quietly. Although Qin Mu was so powerful that she could only look up and see no hope of revenge, it did not mean that she gave up. She must practice hard, become stronger, and take revenge as soon as possible. She believed that as long as she persisted, one day she would become strong enough. Moreover, the elixir that Qin Mu gave her was extremely mysterious. Every time it was used for a week, she could obtain unimaginable benefits. Even for Xuanhuan, the top genius of the Zhao family, this is definitely a great blessing. This makes her more confident and motivated for the future. She sat cross-legged on the futon with her eyes closed tightly, and her whole body exuded a hazy halo, like a holy jade girl. Bang! Suddenly, a loud noise came. The next moment, the door was kicked open, and a cold wind swept in, blowing on Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan woke up from her practice, opened her beautiful eyes and looked towards the door, and saw Qin Mu walking in with a stunning beauty whose dress was half faded. The man is extraordinarily handsome and heroic, while the woman is peerless in elegance and captivates the country. The two stand together like a match made in heaven, a perfect match. Especially when she saw Qin Mu holding the stunning beauty in his arms like a princess, she was stunned. This style of painting seems wrong. This faint king actually shows compassion and cherishes the jade? When Xuanhuan thought about her experience yesterday, a hint of bitterness appeared at the corner of her mouth. There was a tingling feeling in her heart, which made her feel a little dazed, as if she was ashamed of herself. His Majesty. Xuanhuan murmured to herself, seeming to be in some kind of daze. Huh? Qin Mu looked at Xuanhuan and frowned slightly. What's wrong with you? Xuanhuan quickly shook her head and regained consciousness. Her heartbeat was beating violently and her pretty face was red. She couldn't help but glance at the woman in Qin Mu's arms, and felt an inexplicable sourness in her heart. But soon Xuanhuan was shocked and quickly looked away, no longer looking at Qin Mu and the woman in his arms. What's going on? Xuanhuan couldn't help being stunned. When did I have such strange emotions towards this Han Jun? Xuanhuan sighed secretly and quickly shook away the distracting thoughts in her mind. This foolish king is moody, cruel, and mediocre, and is his biggest enemy in this life. How can such emotions arise? Thinking of this, Xuanhuan took a deep breath, calmed her mind, and tried to forget the inexplicable emotion just now. Then, she looked at Qin Mu. This foolish king walked in with a woman in his arms. What did he want to do? She had some guesses in her mind, but she didn't dare to ask any more questions. After all, this foolish king is uncertain, and he might say something wrong, and if he is offended, he will die without a burial place. But she didn't dare to speak, but some people didn't want to be silent. Your Majesty, you were with this sister last night. Yunyani glanced at Xuanhuan, wrapped her jade arms around Qin Mu's neck, and slapped her warm breath on Qin Mu's face, exhaling like orchid, charming all living beings. This sister looks so mature, she must know a lot. After she finished speaking, she gave Xuanhuan a half-smiling look. Xuanhuan's pretty face turned red and she glared at Yunyani with shame and anger. This vixen! She cursed inwardly. Talking about maturity is clearly a disguised way of saying she is old. Xuanhuan gritted her teeth, but she had no choice but to lower her head and ignore Xuanhuan. She was upset now and really had no intention of quarreling with others. Moreover, the other party was obviously more pleasing to the Hanjun, so she would not bring trouble on herself. Sure enough, Qin burst out laughing after hearing this, caressing Xuanhuan's smooth face, and praised, as expected of my Yan'er, she is so smart. Xuanhuan was dumbfounded upon hearing this, and most of the shame and anger that originally arose because of what Xuanhuan said immediately disappeared. Qin doting on Xuanhuan was simply extraordinary. She simply couldn't believe that the tyrannical, ruthless, murderous, lustful, and evil king in front of her could actually have such a gentle and considerate side. This simply subverted her outlook on life and even caused her to hallucinate. Xuanhuan felt jealous and envious. "Your Majesty, who is this sister?" Xuanhuan looked at Xuanhuan and asked with a smile. Qin put Xuanhuan down, smiled slightly, and said calmly, "Her name is Xuanhuan, and she is a direct descendant of the Zhao family." "Oh? She turns out to be the daughter of a noble family. No wonder she has such a noble and elegant temperament." Xuanhuan smiled sweetly, moved lightly, reached out to grab Xuanhuan's little hand, rubbed Xuanhuan's soft palm with her weak and boneless palm, and giggled. "Sister, you are so beautiful. His Majesty likes you so much. We must get along well in the future." Xuanhuan's heart trembled, and her cheeks were on fire. "This vixen is so coquettish." Xuanhuan cursed inwardly, but could not refuse Xuanhuan's approach. She did not dare to neglect and forced a smile. "In front of my sister, my thin and delicate appearance is nothing. We should help and support each other." "He he." Xuanhuan said coquettishly, "Thank you first, sister." Xuanhuan's face froze, and she felt helpless, but she could only continue to smile. She knew her identity and status very well. She had no right to compete with Xuanhuan for favor, so she could only try her best to please her. Today she saw what the harem was like. This woman seemed delicate, but she was full of provocations and tit-for-tat when she spoke. And most importantly, she could not see through the other party's cultivation strength. This made Xuanhuan even more afraid, not knowing what level the other party had reached. She had to be on guard, otherwise she might be stabbed from behind one day and lose her life. However, Xuanhuan was on guard in her heart, but she didn't show it on the surface. After a conversation with Xuanhuan, they had a good chat, just like best friends. On the other side, Qin looked at the two girls with interest. It seems that no matter which world they are in, girls are born actors. There are 8 people in a dormitory and 7 groups, all of whom are acting geniuses. Cough, cough, cough. At this time, Qin coughed a few more times, and even his breathing became a little louder. Xuanhuan's pretty face turned pale, and she hurried forward to pat his back to relieve his breath, her pretty face full of worry. "Your Majesty, are you okay?" she asked with concern, staring at Qin with a pair of watery eyes, her eyes full of heartache. "It's okay." Qin smiled and waved his hand. Seeing this scene, Xuanhuan's eyes flickered, and a hint of doubt emerged in her heart. This tyrant, is he injured? Otherwise, why would he suddenly cough, and even have signs of being out of breath? In an instant, countless speculations flooded into her mind. The more Xuanhuan thought about it, the more she was sure of it. And what Qin said next confirmed her thoughts. "I want to retreat to heal my wounds, and no one is allowed to disturb me." Qin stroked his forehead with one hand, and said in a rather weak tone. Xuanhuan was slightly shocked when she heard this. This tyrant was actually injured. Isn't this a great opportunity for revenge? Xuanhuan's beautiful eyes flickered, and her thoughts raced. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 252. And at this time. Ah. Suddenly, Xuanhuan heard a cry-like sound coming from Longtan behind the screen, which made her delicate body tremble slightly and her pretty face turned crimson. At this moment, a beautiful picture appeared in her mind involuntarily. Xuanhuan's pretty face felt hot. I sighed secretly in my heart. Pooh! What about healing? This foolish king just deliberately made excuses to get that. Shameless fool. But soon, Xuanhuan suppressed the thoughts in her heart and began to think about the scene she just saw. For a moment just now, she did feel that Qin Mu's aura became weak and disordered. It doesn't feel like it's fake. Could it be that it's true? Xuanhuan frowned and her eyes flashed. If true, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even though Qin Mu's cultivation was extremely terrifying, he was injured after all. As long as she grasped it just right, she would succeed in one fell swoop. Although Xuanhuan was not sure whether this was a trap by Han Jun, she was still ready to take a gamble. Thinking of this, Xuanhuan finally couldn't hold back anymore. She slowly approached the screen, hesitated slightly, then gritted her teeth and took a lotus step. "Your Majesty, let me help you heal." Xuanhuan called softly and raised her legs to walk around the screen. Seeing that Qin Mu didn't seem to refuse, a hint of joy flashed in her eyes. The first step of the plan was successful. However, in the next time, she finally understood what innocence meant. A cloud and rain, lasting for a long time. The next day, when the sun shines, Qin Mu lazily woke up from the dragon bed, feeling comfortable and refreshed all over. Last night's battle with Xuanhuan not only allowed him to recover from all his injuries, it was also of great benefit to his cultivation, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of the realm of cultivation. Especially in the second half, Xuanhuan, who came from behind, was not to be outdone. With her years of martial arts training, she suddenly became more popular than Xuanhuan, who had known Qin Mu for a long time. Of course, he lost to Qin Mu in the end. As a result, he is still rolling his eyes now. Xiangxi vomited out half of it and lay unconscious on the side. As for her revenge plan, it was already far away. Qin Mu was feeling the power filling his body. "Your Majesty, I will serve you and dress you." Just as he was thinking about it, a pair of jade arms suddenly hugged his waist, a fragrant fragrance penetrated his nose, and Xuanhuan's charming face came into view. "Yes," Qin Mu responded casually, closing his eyes and enjoying Xuanhuan's service. Xuanhuan's small hands gently squeezed Qin Mu's shoulders. The little bird leaned in his arms like a human, and her delicate lips blew warm air in his ears. "Your Majesty, do you plan to take those concubines with you on the expedition?" Xuanhuan asked softly. "I have too few concubines, so I plan to expand the number of concubines," Qin Mu said lightly. "I plan to add 3,000 more concubines to the harem." "Ah!" Xuanhuan exclaimed, her pink mouth slightly opened, her beautiful eyes stunned. "Still want to recruit? Your Majesty, are you really going to fight?" Xuanhuan felt speechless in her heart. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid there's something wrong with this." Xuanhuan hesitated for a moment, her heart filled with soreness, and reminded in a low voice, "Both the government and the public are saying that your Majesty is promiscuous. If you recruit 3,000 more people in the harem before going on an expedition, this... Are you saying that I am promiscuous?" Qin Mu opened his eyes and glanced at her with a half-smile. The new family doesn't dare." Xuanhuan was startled and hurriedly explained, "The new family means, in this way, the officials up and down the court will discuss it, affecting your Majesty's reputation." Qin Mu asked in return, "Do I still have a reputation?" Xuanhuan: "His Majesty's reputation, seems, has long been gone." However, Xuanhuan didn't dare to say this, so she could only remain silent. "I have my own thoughts on this matter." Qin Mu waved his hand, and then reached out to hold Xuanhuan in his arms. Xuanhuan's pretty face turned red with embarrassment, and she lay obediently in Qin Mu's arms. "Yes, I obey. Time flew by, and in a blink of an eye, it was the day Qin Mu set off for the expedition. Early morning, outside Chang'an City. Countless people and monks gathered here, stretching for tens of kilometers, with no end in sight, and the darkness was overwhelming and spectacular. The news of Qin Mu's personal expedition has been fermented and spread over the past few days, and almost everyone in the entire Chang'an city knows about it. So much so that today, the city of Chang'an had a rare change from the usual hustle and bustle, and became extremely peaceful and silent. There was a thick and chilling atmosphere over the entire city, as if a dark cloud enveloped Chang'an city. No matter whether they viewed Qin Mu with contempt, resentment, sarcasm, jealousy, admiration, or awe. Today, they all stand in front of the city gate to see off the holy emperor who ascended the throne at a young age and ruled over hundreds of millions of people. After all, this is their emperor, and he is going to lead an expedition to fight against enemies from foreign lands. As a subject, how can we not worry? What's more, their fate is also closely connected with that of Qin, and they will both prosper and suffer. So, even if they have complaints about Qin Mu in their hearts, even if Qin Mu is extremely licentious, even if Qin Mu is greedy and lustful, they can only stand behind Qin Mu and support him. Woo! The horn sounded melodiously, and the east gate of Chang'an City slowly opened. At the gate, flags fluttered, and 2 rows of imperial guards stood on the top of the city tower. On the majestic and spacious platform for selecting generals, civil and military officials stood in awe, looking at the dragon throne in front of them. They were all waiting for that figure to appear. P.S. Brothers, I suddenly thought of a very serious question today. If my father-in-law asked me what I do and what my profession is, what should I say? There is nothing shameful about being an author, and it's okay to say it out, but what if my father-in-law also reads Tomato, and then asks about my author account and shows his attention? After all, these are related to my income, he will definitely ask a question, right? If he really asks, then wouldn't it be bad if I don't tell him? Would he think I am not honest enough? Although the novels I wrote, there is no big problem, just a little bit bitter. But if he reads my novels and sees something he shouldn't see, and then enters some skirts he shouldn't enter, and sees some weird extras and weird little nan niang, will he drive me out with a broom? Oh my God, the problem seems to be quite serious. Buddha bless, I hope I am overthinking. Is there another possibility, that is, my father-in-law has actually been a fan of my books for a long time? Or he originally had a general impression of me, but after reading the books I wrote, he was instantly shocked and loved to read them. So the admiration in his heart was like the endless flow of the Yellow River, and he became my fan directly, and from then on he became a brother of the opposite sex with me, and he didn't even ask for a dowry, and even gave me 300,000 yuan plus a house and a car. Is this possible? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 253. The sun flickered and gradually rose, and the golden light fell on the entire ancient and huge city, covering it with a layer of golden brilliance. Under the city wall, everything was silent. On the city wall, the ministers waited patiently. However, as time passed, Qin Mu's figure still did not appear on the general selection platform, and the ministers began to whisper to each other. Your Majesty must return victoriously this time, otherwise, the Qin dynasty will be in danger. An old minister looked up at the high dragon throne, his eyes moist. His voice was sad and full of worry. This resonated with other ministers, and they echoed. This trip can only win, not lose. If we fail, my Qin dynasty may be completely cut off. Yes. An old minister sighed and said, "The Tiankai domain is powerful, and your majesty will face many dangers this time. If you fail, I am afraid that the day when the country is destroyed and the family is ruined will only be a moment." Many civil and military officials sighed. "It's all your majesty's fault for killing so many saints without thinking of the consequences. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to this point today." Not only that, the remaining forces of the aristocratic families scattered across the Qin dynasty are now hiding in the dark and may suddenly attack at any time. If your majesty fails in this trip, they may find a flaw and take advantage of it. Your majesty is really stupid. The more he shouldn't do something, the more he wants to do it. Alas, it's too late to say these now. I just want to see your majesty return triumphantly and everything goes well. I hope your majesty will never do anything amazing and absurd before going to war." Many ministers whispered to each other. All of them were heavy in their hearts, full of worries, but helpless, only bitter. Although they didn't understand what Qin Mu did, let alone what he thought. But what happened in the past can't be changed. Now they can only pray that your majesty can succeed, put down the rebellion as soon as possible, and end the war. And don't do anything shocking and ridiculous before the expedition. Dakin can't afford it. They can't afford it either. Has your majesty discussed the specific matters of the expedition with you? At this time, a general who came from another place asked. According to his combat experience, generally speaking, large-scale wars involving a country's war usually need to be discussed several days in advance, various details are finalized, and corresponding combat plans are formulated so that the soldiers can better complete the task. After all, after the war starts, the situation on the battlefield changes rapidly, every detail is very critical, and the slightest mistake will cause extremely bad consequences. Especially for such a major event as your majesty's personal expedition, it should be treated with caution and must not be sloppy. This expedition is absolutely a battle of life and death for Dakin, which is related to the national destiny. If you win, it will be smooth sailing and singing all the way. If you lose, then Dakin's country will probably be handed over soon. So, no one can afford to lose this battle. Hearing the question from the general, the ministers looked at each other, and fell silent. Many ministers shook their heads and smiled bitterly, with sad faces. "We would like to discuss with His Majesty. It's a pity that His Majesty didn't give us any chance at all, and he didn't even want to meet us. Yes, His Majesty hasn't been to court these days, so how can we talk about it?" Another old minister replied with a bitter smile, looking very helpless. "I'm afraid His Majesty has been enjoying the tenderness of beauties in the harem these days." "Your Majesty." Many ministers looked at each other and complained in low voices. Hearing this, the general looked anxious and frowned. "What does your Majesty want to do? How can you not even discuss it? If this goes on, how can we fight the war? Your Majesty is getting more and more willful and naughty. Yes, we old bones are almost pissed off by His Majesty." Many ministers sighed and sighed, looking depressed. The other ministers who didn't speak also looked worried and sighed. For this expedition to the Apocalypse domain, His Majesty did not issue any other orders except for the order to mobilize the army. No one in the court of the Great Qin knew the specific details, including the ministers. They had originally expected His Majesty to call them together to discuss specific measures to fight against the Apocalypse domain, but they had not seen His Majesty at all in the past few days. Moreover, in recent days, the harem of His Majesty has also been filled with the sounds of singing and dancing, which is very beautiful. All these prove that His Majesty did not take the war seriously at all. Don't panic, everyone. Since His Majesty did not call everyone to discuss, it means that His Majesty must have thought about it a long time ago. Perhaps he has already thought of a way to deal with the enemy, but he just doesn't want to tell us. An old man in a green shirt stood at the head of the team, with a kind face, tall and straight, and calm eyes. It was the current national teacher, Du Yulin. Master Du is right. Your Majesty is wise and brave, and has extraordinary strategies. He must have thought of a solution. We don't need to worry too much. Minister Wang Xin nodded and agreed. The other ministers looked at each other, their expressions still not relaxed. Obviously they didn't think so for the time being. The most urgent thing is to get His Majesty to show up as soon as possible. It's almost noon, why hasn't His Majesty come yet? A minister whispered. The expressions of many ministers became more and more strange after hearing this. Your Majesty is not still in the gentle land, forgetting that today is the day of the expedition. According to His Majesty's character, this is really possible. Ridiculous, it's really too ridiculous. The ministers sighed one after another, with anxious expressions on their faces. Under the city wall, the onlookers and monks couldn't help but whisper to each other. Huh? Why hasn't His Majesty appeared yet? We haven't really been abandoned by His Majesty, have we? This is troublesome. I don't think so. Although His Majesty is a little ridiculous, he is not such a person. I hope so. Qin Mu has never shown up, making the whole Chang'an city fall into a dull and depressing atmosphere. Until dusk, when the sun was setting and dusk fell, he did not appear. This made the countless people and monks gathered under the city wall more and more agitated, and they even began to suspect that Qin Mu had really abandoned them. Even a group of ministers could not sit still. His Majesty, he really did not show up for such an important matter. How is this possible? In this case, can this battle still be won? What is Your Majesty doing? Why hasn't he shown up yet? Some ministers muttered in a low voice, looking confused and full of suspicion. More people were panicked, and their hearts fell to the bottom of the valley. Even if he was immersed in the land of gentleness, he should have shown up by now, right? Did Your Majesty really abandon the great Qin and run away alone to seek refuge? As soon as this thought came to mind, they trembled all over, and cold sweat flowed down. Du Yulin, the national teacher, was also a little uneasy. His brows were furrowed, and a strange light flashed in the depths of his eyes. But in the end, he didn't say anything, but secretly clenched his fists, hiding his inner anxiety and worry. At this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed, "Here he comes! His Majesty is here!" In an instant, everyone turned their heads to look. At this moment, suddenly, a rumbling sound of thunder came from the air in the distance. Then a dazzling silver-white meteor broke through the sky, shot straight to the sky above the general's platform, and landed in the center of the general's platform. The meteor emitted infinite brilliance, illuminating the entire Chang'an city like daylight. I saw a magnificent dragon chariot slowly coming from the depths of the city. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 254. This dragon chariot is octagonal and huge. It is engraved with complex patterns all around, full of mysterious meanings, as if it has spirituality, giving people an extremely unfathomable feeling. It is surrounded by mist, filled with rosy clouds, and auspicious colors, like a giant beast cast in gold, bearing its fangs and claws, majestic and majestic. Outside the chariot, there are hundreds of powerful figures waiting. Each of them is tall and majestic, strong and burly, with sharp eyes that seem to be able to pierce the sky. Inside the chariot, Qin Mu sits on a soft couch, looking leisurely and lazy. On both sides of him, there is a beautiful woman. Both women are peerless beauties, with graceful figures, skin like cream, and veils on their faces, revealing only a pair of watery and lively eyes, looking around and looking graceful, and peerless. Every move was charming and seductive, making people's heartbeats accelerate. Not only that, behind Qin Mu, there were several beautiful women. Their dresses were fluttering, their figures were graceful, their skin was whiter than snow, and they were beautiful. Their temperament was also very different from ordinary beauties, exuding a noble and elegant aura, like fairies exiled to the earth. Even at Qin Mu's feet, there were a row of beautiful women with graceful temperament and beautiful faces kneeling, each of them shy and spring-like, with peach blossoms in their eyes. They held silk handkerchiefs and gently helped Qin Mu wipe the sweat from his temples, serving him attentively, just like a group of personal maids. Fortunately, this dragon chariot was big enough, otherwise it would not be easy to accommodate so many people. The dragon chariot slowly drove out of Chang'an City and arrived at the general's platform. "Your Majesty is here. Welcome, my emperor." Seeing the dragon chariot stop, a group of civil officials and generals immediately knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty," countless imperial guards knelt on the ground and shouted loudly. Countless civilians and monks under the city wall knelt on the ground like a wave, shouting "Long live the emperor," with rolling voices and momentum, rushing straight into the sky. Finally, under the anxious and expectant gazes of the crowd, Qin Mu, dressed in a black dragon robe, opened the door and walked out of the dragon chariot. Behind him, followed a group of beautiful women. Each of them was dressed in a graceful manner, with an extraordinary temperament, as if the nine heavens' mysterious lady had descended to the world, attracting attention. These women included beautiful concubines, pure and pretty palace maids, peerless and enchanting demon girls, gentle and virtuous ladies, charming and seductive concubines, and beautiful demon girls. Each woman had an extraordinary charm that was enough to attract the attention of any man. For a time, this group of beautiful women was like elves in the night, dazzling. So beautiful. Oh my God! So many fairies. These women, even if they are just maids, are enough to be the most beautiful women in Chang'an. Looking at the beautiful women who were as beautiful as fairies in the sky, the ministers were dumbfounded again. "What is your Majesty going to do? How can you bring so many women to such a serious place as the Dianjiangtai? Your Majesty, please have tea." The beautiful woman in Qin Mu's arms smiled coquettishly, handed out the teacup with her slender hands, and sent it to Qin Mu's mouth. Qin Mu held the teacup, tasting the fragrant tea, holding the beautiful woman in his arms, and was contented. He seemed to be completely unaware of the eyes of the officials around him. "Sorry, I got up late today." Qin Mu put down the cup in his hand and said lightly. "Ministers." Sure enough. The corners of the ministers' mouths twitched violently. They knew that your Majesty must have forgotten the important moment of today. If not, how could you be so late? Not only that, you also brought so many women with you. Are you here to fight or to have an outing? For a moment, both civil and military officials were extremely upset. Would His Majesty want to lead these women to fight in person? When they thought of this possibility, many people's hearts couldn't help but twitch violently, and they wanted to faint on the spot. If this is really the case, how should this war be fought? Qin Mu raised his eyes slightly and glanced at the ministers. "Stand up." After saying that, Qin Mu walked straight to the general's platform in front. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Everyone kowtowed again. "Your Majesty, you are finally here." A man in red official uniform, wearing a black gauze hat, and a round figure, quickly stood up and walked to Qin Mu to salute. His face was full of smiles and joy. It was Wang Xing, the Minister of Revenue. Qin Mu glanced at him and said with a smile, "I'm late, you won't blame me, right?" "Your Majesty, what are you talking about?" "We just arrived too," Wang Xing said with a smile. "Ministers. When it comes to flattery, they really have to admit defeat." Qin Mu nodded, his eyes swept across the dense crowd below, and asked, "How many troops were mobilized this time?" "Your Majesty," Wang Xing bowed and replied, "this time, there are a total of 56 armies accompanying Your Majesty, each with a total of 3.8 million troops." After a pause, he added, "In addition, there are 24 armies on the way. After listening to Wang Xing's report, Qin Mu nodded slightly, yes. Your Majesty, Wang Xing reminded cautiously, although we now have 56 armies, their strength is generally not high, and I am afraid they are not up to the task. These armies are just conventional forces. When facing a truly powerful existence, they are of no use at all. I understand, Qin Mu said lightly. It's good that your Majesty understands. Wang Xing breathed a sigh of relief. Then Qin Mu's next sentence made him stunned for a moment. Disband all these armies, go back to where they came from, they are no longer needed. Wang Xing was stunned. The rest of the court officials were also confused. This. Disbanded just like that? Your Majesty, our army has been prepared for so long, and we have worked hard to gather them back, and they are just dispersed like this. Your Majesty, are we not going to go to war? Wang Xing asked cautiously. Qin Mu shook his head and smiled, of course we have to go to war, but we have to change the people we summon. Wang Xing frowned, a little confused, Your Majesty, I don't understand what you mean. Disband these troops and replace them with beautiful women. Do you understand? Qin Mu glanced at him and said slowly. Wang Xing. Ministers. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 255. Qin Mu's words instantly silenced the entire general station. Your Majesty, this. Wang Xing opened his mouth, but couldn't speak. This time, everyone was even more confused, shocked, and a series of questions emerged in their minds. Your Majesty, are you serious? These armies have just gathered and now they have to be dispersed. Doesn't this mean that all the efforts have been wasted? What's more, just to disband the army, you actually want to replace all the troops with stunning beauties. What is this operation? The ministers looked at each other in confusion, and one general even couldn't help but pick his ears, as if he suspected that he had heard wrongly. They originally thought that His Majesty would take these concubines with him on this expedition, which was absurd enough. But it wasn't until this moment that they realized how wrong they were. They still far underestimated the extent of His Majesty's absurdity. Not only did His Majesty bring Ying with him, but he also wanted to replace the entire army with stunning beauties. It's so heartbreaking. What on earth was this special person thinking? Your Majesty, are you sure you are not teasing me? The faces of the ministers were extremely strange. They now seriously suspected that His Majesty had no intention of going out at all, but was using the reason for the expedition to change places to have fun. Otherwise, why would you bring so many warblers with you when you go on an expedition, and why would you recruit a group of stunning beauties as female soldiers? Cough, cough, cough. The national master Du Yulin on the side suddenly covered his chest and coughed violently several times, his face turned red, and he looked like he could hardly breathe. When the ministers saw this, they were all shocked. Master, how are you? Master, are you still injured? National Master, you must hold on. Our great Qin cannot do without you. Yes, Imperial Master. From now on, His Majesty will still have to rely on your coffin if he doesn't go to court. The ministers looked extremely anxious, fearing that Du Yulin would just belch like this. It's out of the way. Du Yulin waved his hand, exhaled slowly, and his expression became much more solemn. I'm just choked. Just rest for a while. Hearing this, the ministers were relieved. National Preceptor, please don't die. He is going to die. Who can let His Majesty go to court in the future? Du Yulin calmed down for a while, took 2 deep breaths, and then returned to normal. Looking at Qin Mu, who was standing high up with his hands behind his back, he sighed, worry flashing in his eyes. He understood and even supported His Majesty's previous actions, including his lateness today, and even spoke out to excuse them. But His Majesty's order this time was completely incomprehensible to him. This is an expedition, not playing house, how could you say such childish words? Moreover, it was still in public. Your Majesty, is this crazy? Taking a group of stunning beauties to fight? He has lived for so long, fought so many battles, and this is the first time he has heard of such a ridiculous thing. Du Yulin couldn't help but cover his chest, feeling that he was about to suffocate. Your Majesty, going on an expedition is related to the safety of the country, so we must not be rash. Finally, Du Yulin couldn't help but admonished. He must remind His Majesty that this battle is crucial to His Majesty. This war is a battle related to the fate of Great Qin, and it must not be lost. Qin Mu turned around and glanced at him, with no wave in his eyes. I have my own sense of proportion. Du Yulin opened his mouth to speak, but didn't know what to say. That's all, that's all. He sighed and stepped aside. Your Majesty, I am ignorant, do you mean to replace our army with female soldiers? At this time, Wang Xing blinked and asked tentatively. Qin Mu nodded and said calmly. That's right, that's what I mean. Wang Iking, didn't you say that these armies have average combat power and are of little use? So after careful consideration, I decided that it would be more useful to replace them all with stunning beauties. After all, this expedition has high mountains and long roads. What if I get lonely on the road? If all the troops are replaced by stunning beauties, then I can go on an expedition and relieve my loneliness at the same time. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Having said this, he glanced at the ministers and continued, is there any problem? Ministers. What's the problem? Of course there is a problem. Big problem. It's ridiculously big. How can you go to war with a bunch of women? Ha 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 ha, an old minister laughed suddenly, pointed at Qin Mu and said, Your Majesty, you. He was already stunned by Qin Mu's idea. Such extremely absurd words were actually spoken by the emperor of a country. It is really unbelievable and subverts the worldview. Wang Xing was also complaining in his heart. It was indeed his words that these armies were embarrassed and useless, but they were just modest words. De Qin's army is still very powerful. In many regular battles, it cannot be said that it is invincible. At least it understands the true meaning of battle better than many disciples of the Holy Land sects. Without these armies, many things would not be possible. Wang Xing pondered for a moment and decided to express his inner worries. After all, this was a major matter related to the stability of the country. Your Majesty, this matter is not trivial. Please think twice. Wang Xing clasped his fists respectfully and said with sincerity in his eyes, Please forgive me for your bold words. This expedition is a battle between Tianlan territory and Tiankai territory. If we lose, it means that the Qin dynasty has failed. If your Majesty wants to have fun, I have no objection. But going to war is a national event, and it must not be taken lightly. Please think twice. Wang Xing's words surprised all the ministers. They looked at Wang Xing in astonishment, and they didn't believe that such words came from his mouth. Isn't this guy a flatterer? Why did he suddenly start to speak human words today? What's more, what he said was quite reasonable, which made them all praise him. Even Du Yulin looked at Wang Xing in surprise, nodded slightly, and admired him. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and looked around with interest. Oh? Do you want to stop me? Wang Xing knelt down and kowtowed when he heard it, I dare not, but I am loyal to the king and love my country. I beg your Majesty to withdraw the order. Although he is a flatterer, he also knows what it means to prosper together and suffer together. Disbanding the army before the expedition was your Majesty's willful act. If the defeat is caused by this, who will bear the responsibility? Although he believed in your Majesty's behavior this time was too absurd. Therefore, even if Wang Xing was unwilling, he had to bite the bullet and say these words. With Wang Xing's lead, other ministers also plucked up their courage and knelt down to advise. Your Majesty, we have prepared the army, and we only need your order. Now you suddenly announce the disbandment of the army. Isn't this too hasty? A general said cautiously with a sad face. Your Majesty, do you know how much impact it would cause if all the soldiers were female soldiers? Another old man pondered. Have you ever thought that if the secular people and ordinary soldiers knew about this, it would definitely cause an uproar? At that time, it might even affect this expedition. Your Majesty. Please think twice, several other ministers quickly echoed, with a worried look on their faces. Yes, Your Majesty. Don't do anything foolish. Your Majesty, we all think that Lord Wang's proposal is very much in line with our wishes. I hope Your Majesty will think twice. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 256. Qin Mu looked at the ministers arguing coldly. For a moment, the whole platform was in a mess, and the scene was extremely chaotic, like a vegetable market. Qin Mu glanced around indifferently, and then said lightly, since you all think my decision is absurd, then according to your opinion, who should I take to the expedition? As soon as these words fell, the platform became silent in an instant. Everyone was stunned in place, and they didn't know how to answer for a while. This question is really hard to answer. This expedition is obviously a fierce battle. If only a few civil officials and military generals are sent to die, I am afraid it will not be enough for others to fill their teeth. But even if all the civil and military officials in the court went, they would not be sure of winning. Because this matter is a dead end no matter how you look at it. It feels crazy to think about using the power of one country to compete with the two human territories. It feels like a fairy tale. Seeing that everyone was silent, Qin Mu slowly stood up, his eyes were cold, and his voice was calm. What? Weren't you arguing so loudly just now? Are you all silent now? A bunch of rubbish. Since you won't say anything, I'll answer for you. I don't need you to participate in this expedition. I'll go to the battlefield myself. Qin Mu's powerful words immediately shocked everyone. The faces of everyone changed drastically, and finally, a general raised his head tremblingly and looked at Qin Mu. Your Majesty, he gritted his teeth and said with a stiff face. I think your decision is too risky. You are of noble status and worth a fortune. How can you take risks? Besides, the Qin dynasty still needs you to guard the court and ensure the long-term foundation of the Qin dynasty. How can you take risks easily? I think the best way is to defend as an attack and slowly wear down the enemy. When the enemy retreats, the Qin dynasty will take the opportunity to recuperate and restore its vitality, and then plan to go on the expedition. Only in this way can it survive for a long time. This matter went around and around, and it came back to the question of whether Qin Mu should lead the army in person. Everyone nodded secretly when they heard this. As long as the emperor can be prevented from leading the army in person, these problems can be solved from the root. After listening to the general's advice, Qin Mu sat back on the dragon chair, crossed his hands, placed them on the table, and looked amused. Are you done? He stared at the general who was speaking indifferently, with a cold look. So according to you, our great Qin is going to give up this war and become a coward? Qin Mu asked coldly. The general's expression froze, and a sentence was stuck in his throat, and he couldn't speak for a long time. Qin Mu shook his head and said lightly. I will not only lead the army in person, but also lead the army in a grand manner, so that people all over the world know that the Great Qin is capable of fighting the Tiankai domain. He looked around at everyone and said loudly, "My Great Qin is not afraid of anything." Everyone was silent, and they all trembled all over, and their hearts were shocked like a sea of water. Qin Mu's domineering was beyond their expectations. Such words were simply arrogant, and arrogant to the extreme. However, domineering is domineering. Why do you have to take so many women to the war? These generals kept complaining in their hearts. After Qin Mu glanced around, he turned his eyes back to the generals and said coldly, "What? Do you have any objections?" The generals felt numb all over, and beads of sweat oozed from their foreheads when they were stared at by Qin Mu's cold eyes. They swallowed their saliva, bowed their heads and said respectfully, "Your Majesty is wise." Seeing this, Qin Mu snorted coldly, looked at the ministers again, and said lightly, "Do you have any other opinions?" Hearing this, everyone shook their heads. At this time, Wang Xing raised his hand in fear. "Your Majesty, there is another question." Seeing this, Qin Mu glanced at him and said casually, "Speak." "Your Majesty, what if you can't gather so many beautiful women for a while?" Wang Xing said weakly. "It doesn't matter, take as many as you can, and talk about it first," Qin Mu said casually. "Yes, I accept the order." Wang Xing immediately bowed his head and accepted the order. After all, no one can change what His Majesty has decided. And His Majesty never does things according to common sense. Maybe it will be the same this time. Seeing this, the other ministers could only sigh and stop advising. So, a large-scale military review that was thought to be passionate and majestic ended with an incredible result. When this news reached the ears of ordinary monks and civilians outside the city wall, everyone couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, and then they were completely boiling. "Your Majesty is actually going to take a group of women to the war. Ah! What is this for? Are the men of my Great Qin not worthy of going to the battlefield? This is a war that concerns the survival of the country. Your Majesty is actually taking women to the battlefield. This is too ridiculous. What does Your Majesty want to do? Your Majesty is actually going to take women to the war. Does he think that the Great Qin is not falling fast enough? At this time, you still have to take beautiful women to the war. It is clearly creating opportunities for the enemy. Your Majesty actually wants to win the war with a group of women? I really don't know what he is thinking." After a brief uproar, countless people began to get angry. They were all angry about this sudden news. They are not discriminating against women, but wars have always been done by men since ancient times. Although there are also some female heroes, there has never been such a situation as today. More people began to worry. Why does Your Majesty want to bring women? What can they do on the battlefield? I think Your Majesty is not going to the war, but to enjoy himself. That's right, how can you bring women to the battlefield? It's unheard of and unseen. They are deeply suspicious and disagree with Qin Mu's behavior of recruiting women to go to war. In their opinion, this is completely Qin Mu's selfish desire, regardless of the overall situation, and doing whatever he wants. However, compared with these men, many women are quite looking forward to it. This is an opportunity to fly up to the tree and become a phoenix. If you can get the favor of Your Majesty again, it will be a real step to heaven. Thinking of this, many women's heartbeats accelerated and their cheeks flushed. They faintly emerged in their hearts, hoping that Qin Mu would choose them. Your Majesty, I am willing to follow you, serve you, and do my best. A charming woman with a good figure and a beautiful face took the lead in recommending herself. I am also willing to go, please accept me, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, I am willing to serve you and do my best for you. In an instant, the whole Chang'an city was filled with beautiful women, colorful and tender words. Groups of beautiful and charming women rushed out and volunteered. Their faces were rosy, their looks were charming, Their eyes were rippling, and their smiles were full of temptation. Even many beautiful women joined in, wanting to participate in this feast and win Qin Mu's favor. This made countless men indignant and cursed. They seemed to have seen the scene of their wives and His Majesty loving each other. Finally, after a few hours, a team of tens of thousands of stunning women appeared in Chang'an, in front of the city's general selection platform. The reason why there are only tens of thousands is because Qin Mu's requirements are very high, and those who fail to pass the score cannot be selected at all. Looking at those beautiful women with graceful dresses, delicate and soft, and pitiful, the ministers on the general selection platform were stunned. How can this look like going to war? It's just a spring breeze, a beautiful and lingering outing, right? It's over, it's all over. The Qin dynasty is over. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 257. Many court officials felt a black screen in front of their eyes, and almost fainted. Is this the army chosen by His Majesty? They looked at the rows of beautiful ladies in front of them, and they felt their heads buzzing and their hearts were dead. His Majesty is indeed a foolish, lustful, and licentious emperor. They were almost broken-hearted. What else can these women do besides being beautiful? What can they use to fight the enemy? Are they acting cute? Du Yulan was also full of black lines, wailing in his heart, and suddenly felt dizzy. The Qin dynasty is over. His Majesty has gone crazy. An idea suddenly popped up in everyone's head. No matter what the Qin dynasty will face next, or what kind of war it will experience, there is no doubt that their Majesty is crazy. Otherwise, who can take so many delicate and tender women to the battle? Isn't this going to die? All the ministers were already dead-hearted and didn't know what to say. They seemed to have seen the scene of the Qin dynasty's demise. Qin Mu's expression was completely opposite to theirs. On the stage, Qin Mu stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the rows of beauties below, with a satisfied look on his face. These women have their own characteristics, some are gentle, some are lively, and some are sexy. In short, they are all beautiful beauties with good looks. Especially the two leading women, with fair skin and delicate features. One of them was wearing a red dress, with beautiful eyebrows and eyes, and the other was wearing black clothes, with a tall and plump figure, but exuding a bit of coldness and murderousness. And the one who interested him most was the woman in the red dress. This woman had a very hot body, with snowy shoulders exposed, and a face as beautiful as a fairy, especially those soul-sucking phoenix eyes, which could almost suck away a man's soul. Even with Qin Mu's current concentration, he couldn't help but lose his mind slightly. If he hadn't been used to seeing stunning beauties, if he had been an ordinary person, he would probably have been seduced by this red-robed woman at that time. This woman. Qin Mu looked at her deeply, his eyes surprised. She is quite interesting. This woman gave him a feeling of Ji Hong II 2.0, but unfortunately, she did not have the domineering and majestic aura of Ji Hong II, but had a little more charm of Sumair. It was like a combination of the two. Qin Mu glanced at the woman in black again. Although she also had a proud figure and a cold face, she was less mature than the woman in red robes, with a hint of immaturity, like a newborn deer, which made people love her. She must not be very old. Qin Mu smiled. It was indeed worthy of my great Qin. It found so many beautiful women in such a short time. This efficiency was amazing. Qin Mu looked forward to this expedition more and more. If he could break through the Tiankai domain and capture those so-called saints of the sects, his strength would surely usher in a rapid growth. Your Majesty. Du Yulan and a group of ministers were so anxious that they jumped up and down, but His Majesty could still laugh. And that look, Your Majesty, you are probably not selecting a concubine. An old minister trembled in front of Qin Mu and pleaded sadly. Your Majesty, you must not take these women to the war. Yes, Your Majesty. If you insist on taking these women to the war, we have no choice but to ask the ancestors to come out and stop you. Other court officials echoed. These women are more charming than each other, how can they look like they are capable of fighting? Your Majesty takes them to the war? Isn't that a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth? Qin Mu frowned when he heard this. The ancestors are in seclusion to break through to a higher realm, how can you disturb them? Many court officials were silent. They really couldn't understand. They said that the things they advised were obviously for the good of Dakin. Why did His Majesty insist on his own opinion? Your Majesty, think twice. Du Yulin gritted his teeth and advised, this trip is extremely dangerous. If we were not helpless, we would not have kept advising you. Yes, Your Majesty, a great scholar with a white beard also said, although these women are beautiful, they are just vases after all, and they are not worthy of being in a refined hall. Your Majesty needs to think about it in the long run. The court officials persuaded earnestly. However, Qin Mu still had a faint smile on his face. Your Majesty, a civil and military official knelt on the ground again, shouting in grief and anger, please take back your order. Your Majesty, several more civil and military officials knelt on the ground and pleaded earnestly, I hope Your Majesty will take back your order. Soon, hundreds of civil and military officials knelt down together and cried out sadly, Your Majesty, please take back your order. Your Majesty, please take back your order. The sound was like waves hitting the shore, deafening and magnificent. But Qin Mu still had a smile on his face. He waved his sleeves lightly, pass the order down. Qin Mu said lightly, reward the 3 armies tonight, and move out tomorrow. Everyone raised their heads and looked at their own emperor, with twitching mouths. Your Majesty, are you sure you are not kidding us? Reward the 3 armies? Where are their 3 armies? Your Majesty. Du Yulin and others cried again, but Qin Mu had already turned around and left with tens of thousands of women's troops to reward them. Du Yulin and others looked at each other, all worried. Alas! After a long time, a minister sighed. Your Majesty is still young after all, too willful and reckless, what's wrong with this? Yes, an old minister next to him wiped his tears, I thought Your Majesty had changed, but I never thought that this time, alas, forget it, forget it. Many ministers shook their heads and sighed, with expressions of sadness and helplessness on their faces. They originally thought that Qin Mu was already a wise monarch, but now it seems that he was too naive. This is simply a tyrannical tyrant. If the Qin dynasty falls into the hands of such a tyrant, it will fall sooner or later. Everyone, come with us to the imperial study room and state the pros and cons to His Majesty, Du Yulin said solemnly, with a rather heavy tone. The ministers nodded. No matter what, we cannot let this matter go, otherwise, the country of Qin will be in danger. Then all the ministers also left one after another. There was no one else on the general stage except the imperial guards responsible for guarding. Under the Dianzhong stage, the onlookers were still unwilling to leave, and they all looked at the Dianzhong stage and whispered. Tisk, what do you think His Majesty wants to do, to bring so many women to the war? What's the use of speculating about His Majesty's decision? But I heard that Your Majesty is going to appoint a demon saint of the Fox clan as his concubine. Could it be that the demon saint of the Fox clan bewitched Your Majesty, and that's why you are so absurd and foolish? It's really possible, the Fox clan is the best at bewitching, especially the demon saint of the Fox clan, who is also known as the nine-tailed sky fox. It's easy to confuse people. Haha, how could Your Majesty be bewitched? Don't forget, our great Qin has ancestors in charge. Having said that, our ancestors have been practicing in seclusion for so long, who knows if they can make it in time. No matter what, Your Majesty's decision today is extremely ridiculous and foolish. The crowd around the Dianzhong stage was excited. Courtiers kept rushing to the imperial study, obviously preparing to give advice to Qin Mu. It was late at night, so of course it was impossible for Qin Mu to appear in the imperial study. Otherwise, wouldn't it be equivalent to working overtime? As a foolish king, how could he be so conscientious? The purpose of the minister's trip was destined to fail. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 258. In the bedroom. Qin Mu had just sat down when he received a reward notification from the system. Ding! It was detected that the host did not bring troops when he went to war, but instead brought tens of thousands of beautiful women for pleasure. This is the most ridiculous thing in the world, and there is no other stupid act obtain the reward of stupidity, the innate treasure, the demon refining pot. Demon refining pot, it is one of the innate treasures. It has incredible power. There is a small world inside it. It can store all things and refine all things. It has a miraculous effect of innate restraint on demons especially. Qin Mu was startled. The demon refining pot can refine all things. Can it restrain the demon clan? He was suddenly interested. With this thing, he will have a stronger advantage when facing the demon clan in the future. After all, there are many creatures in the demon race, and each creature has its own special characteristics. Some are physically powerful and indestructible, while others specialize in spiritual attacks and are difficult to defend against. If he encounters a demon creature, having the demon refining pot as a killer weapon can save him a lot of trouble. And according to the system description, this demon refining pot also contains a small world, so this will be even more convenient. He can put all the concubines in the harem, the maids Gongyi, and the tens of thousands of beautiful women he just summoned into this demon refining pot, so that no matter where he goes, he can enjoy the blessings of everyone. This is called a mobile harem. He narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. This demon refining pot is really practical. This is a rare treasure. If used well, it will definitely benefit him endlessly. If the demon refined pot knew what Qin Mu was thinking at this time, he would definitely be speechless. It is an innate treasure after all, but you used it to do this? What an insult! However, Qin Mu didn't feel there was anything wrong with his idea. His eyes were bright and he couldn't wait to take out the demon refining pot. This pot is green in color and exudes a lustrous luster. The body of the pot is engraved with various strange runes. It seems simple and unpretentious, but it vaguely reveals a sense of mystery and unpredictability. On the top of the pot lid, there is a crystal clear green bead, suspended like a drop of water. Qin Mu stared at the demon refining pot and realized that the body of the pot seemed small, but it seemed to hide a vast universe, which was awe-inspiring and mysterious. He stretched out his hand and held the pot. In an instant, the demon refining pot glowed brightly. Immediately afterwards, a strange wave emerged, instantly covering the room. Streams of green smoke emerged from the pot, curling up. What the hell is this? At this time, a charming and frightened voice sounded from a corner of the palace. Immediately, a beautiful figure appeared out of thin air, looking at the demon refining pot in surprise. She is wearing a pink dress, her skin is white and delicate, her facial features are exquisite and charming, her eyebrows are painted with cinnabar, and she has a sultry charm with every frown. Astonishingly, it was none other than the nine-tailed sky fox Xuanhuan. But now Xuanhuan's face was pale and her whole body was trembling, as if she was under a huge threat. The charming appearance of the past is completely gone. She stared at the demon refining pot in Qin Mu's hand, her heart filled with shock. What is this pot? Just a trace of fluctuation made her feel horrified, as if she was being stared at by a wild beast. She had no doubt that if she dared to make even the slightest rash move, she would be killed in an instant. Master, what is this? Xuanhuan stared at the demon refining pot with fear in her eyes. Ha ha! Qin Mu chuckled twice. Good stuff. It can be seen from Sumayer's expression that this demon refining pot is indeed very powerful, otherwise she would not be so frightened. If he had possessed this demon refining pot earlier, he might have been able to conquer Sumayer easily. Sumayer looked at the demon refining pot in fear, then turned to look at Qin Mu with resentment and pleading in her eyes, "Master." Qin Mu smiled and put away the demon refining pot. "Go and bring them in." As if she had been granted amnesty, Sumayer immediately left the palace and soon led thousands of beautiful women into the palace. "I will pay my respects to your majesty. Long live our emperor." A group of stunningly beautiful maids knelt at Qin Mu's feet and kowtowed together. "Flat body. Thank you, your majesty." Qin Mu glanced at the Yingyinyan at his feet, and the corner of his mouth slowly raised an arc. "I want to reward the 3 armies tonight, and I'll start with you first. Are you willing?" "I, the slave, is willing." The women responded quickly, fearing that they would be late and miss this opportunity. Qin Mu nodded with satisfaction, then, "Just line up one by one." According to the order. All the girls stood up in unison and lined up. Qin Mu's eyes passed over these women and suddenly stopped at the woman in the red dress. The girl in the red dress noticed Qin Mu's gaze. Her eyebrows were curved, the corners of her mouth were curved in a charming way, her pupils were shining with charm, and her whole body was filled with a strong aura of charm. "What's your name?" Qin Mu pointed at her. The woman in the red dress smiled charmingly and said in a soft voice, "My slave Honglian." Honglian, the corners of Qin Mu's mouth curled up. "What a coincidence." Qin Mu said calmly, "You are the first." Honglian was overjoyed when she heard this, and quickly knelt down on the ground, saying softly, "I obey my order." After she finished speaking, she raised her head and looked at Qin Mu with charming eyes. Her eyes were swaying, and she was still trying to speak. She licked her lips, her voice becoming more seductive, "I will undress and serve your majesty." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows. He did not stop her and let Honglian untie her outer robe. In front of thousands of beautiful women, Honglian took off her coat, revealing a thin red belly band, which outlined her exquisite curves and aroused people's reverie. Honglian twisted her plump waist and approached Qin Mu, breathing like orchids and saying, "Your Majesty, please have mercy on me." At this moment in the imperial study, the national teacher Du Yulan and a group of senior officials in the court were waiting anxiously. However, even though several palace maids went to report, Qin Mu did not arrive. Du Yulan even took out the black coffin, but Qin Mu still did not show up. The ministers had to sigh and leave the imperial study. The next day, the morning light was dim, and the golden sunlight fell, illuminating the entire palace city. Qin Mu led tens of thousands of women's troops to the city gate. Although he couldn't reward them all in one night, there was still a long way to go. Qin Mu could reward them slowly on the way to the battle. At this time, tens of thousands of civilians and monks still gathered under the city wall. They had not left and had been waiting here for a whole night. Qin Mu stood on the general's platform, overlooking the dark crowd below, with a lazy look. He glanced at the crowd, then looked down at the city, and said, "I declare that we will officially go out today." Following his voice, all the women's troops drew their swords, with cold light. Qin Mu nodded slightly, "Let's go." As the voice fell, tens of thousands of women's troops turned into a silver dragon and rushed into the distance. They were so fast that they disappeared from sight in the blink of an eye. Looking at the backs of the women's troops leaving, everyone couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh. "It's ridiculous, Your Majesty actually took a group of women to fight. Which emperor of our great Qin dynasty was not wise and brave, proficient in both civil and military strategies? Why did it become like this when it came to Your Majesty's turn? Ridiculous. Stupid." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Bulletin Leng. Chapter 259. Not long after Qin Mu left, State Councillor Du Yulin hurried over with a group of ministers. Looking at the empty general order stand, Du Yulin sighed with worry, it's still a step too late. Well. Many ministers sighed heavily. Your Majesty has a stubborn personality and doesn't listen to advice at all. Yes, since ancient times, war has been so dangerous, let alone against a behemoth like the Apocalypse domain. I'm afraid that your Majesty was so fascinated last night that he lost his mind. Unfortunately, I waited all night in the Imperial study room. In the face of a formidable enemy, your Majesty only cares about having fun. It's ridiculous to think about it. I'm afraid the world has been completely disappointed in your Majesty. Yes, if this continues, our great Qin will be in chaos before the enemy comes in. Hey, I hope your Majesty's trip goes well, otherwise our great Qin will really be doomed. Listening to the chattering discussions of several ministers around him, Du Yulin narrowed his eyes, pondered for a moment, and said, My colleagues, the matter has come to this, there is no point in worrying anymore. Your Majesty has made up his mind. We can only believe in His Majesty. After hearing what the Imperial Master said, everyone immediately fell silent. Indeed, it is useless to talk about this now. Now we can only hope that your Majesty's trip will go well. Master Imperial Master, I wonder if your Majesty can return safely from this expedition, someone asked. Du Yulin looked around, was silent for a moment and said, No matter what, we will prepare for the worst. Send the order, prepare for war everywhere in Dakan, and ensure the safety of the people. In addition, seal off the capital and be on strict guard against spies sneaking into our Dakan territory. If there is any abnormality, report it immediately. We must also do our best to search for the remnants of the aristocratic families. Once discovered, we will eradicate them and leave no survivors. A cold look appeared on Du Yulin's face. Many first-class families in Daqin have been uprooted by His Majesty, but there are still a small number of remnants wandering outside and dormant. These hidden dangers must be eradicated, otherwise once disaster breaks out, the entire Qin dynasty may be in turmoil. Especially at this special stage when His Majesty is going on an expedition, we should be even more vigilant. As the great Qin state councillor, he must guard the rear for His Majesty so that His Majesty will have no worries when he goes on an expedition. Du Yulin's eyes were firm and he held his hands tightly. As he continued his series of instructions, all the ministers nodded in agreement. His Majesty was absent and did not leave any edicts. Therefore, during this period, the Imperial Master was the only backbone they could choose, and they could only follow Du Yulin's instructions. No matter whether your Majesty wins or loses in the end, we must protect our country and the country of Qin, and protect the people of Li. We must not slack off. Du Yulin looked serious. I sincerely follow the teachings of the Imperial Master. All the ministers lowered their heads and agreed in unison. Du Yulin's words immediately united the people who were originally a little distracted, and the spirits of the ministers also improved a lot, as if they had instantly found the motivation to fight. After all, Dakan is their home, the place where they were born and raised. They would not be willing to abandon their homes unless it was absolutely necessary. Du Yulin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, let's all go down and get ready. Yes, the ministers responded. Everyone said goodbye and left, leaving Du Yulin alone on the huge stage. He stood in the center of the general stage, standing with his hands behind his hands, looking at the empty and lonely surroundings. A complex and difficult to identify emotion appeared on his face, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he murmured, I hope everything goes well this time, Your Majesty. At this time, the Apocalypse domain. All forces gathered their forces and prepared to attack the Tianlan region where Daqin was located to seek justice for their dead saints. The entire apocalypse territory is turbulent and undercurrents are raging. There has not been such a lively scene in thousands or even 10,000 years. There is no dynasty in Tiankai territory, but the regions are divided according to the situation of sects and aristocratic families. These sects and aristocratic families were founded by powerful people from all sides. Each city has its own sect to maintain order in the city. The apocalypse territory is divided into 5 regions: southeast, northwest, and middle. Each region is controlled by major forces from all sides. Superpowers such as Xiwei Immortal Palace and Shaking Light Holy Land occupied the territory in the northern part of the apocalypse territory and became a veritable hegemonic power. Other places are occupied by powerful forces such as Baidu Sect, Xuanji Palace, Yunyan Sect, Duckweed Sword Sect, Fenglay Pavilion, Qinkan Sect, etc. In each region, there is a sect alliance. These powerful overlord-level forces have joined forces to form alliances in their respective regions, monopolizing almost 90% of the resources and wealth of the apocalypse region. Other small sects can only rely on them. To a certain extent, Apocalypse Realm is the check and balance of the 5 major sect alliances. On weekdays, these 5 major sect alliances restrict each other, compete with each other, and have friction with each other. No one can do anything about anyone, and the entire apocalypse domain presents a delicate balance. In the past few days, the entire apocalypse territory has completely changed. After discussions on that day, the 5 major sect alliances have formed a unified alliance and vowed to destroy Daqin. The Apocalypse Alliance calls on all forces in the Apocalypse region to participate in this battle and defeat the Qin dynasty together. Great Qin will be destroyed in this battle. By then, we will carve up Great Qin's territory and enjoy huge benefits. Although Tianlan territory is small, it is extremely fertile. We might as well take this opportunity to expand. The forces in the Apocalypse domain and the Wind Spirit domain have reached a consensus. If they join forces, the Qin dynasty will never win. For a time, all kinds of news swept across the Apocalypse domain. The Apocalypse Alliance, composed of the 5 major sect alliances, called on the entire Apocalypse domain to attack the Qin dynasty together, which made countless cultivators in the Apocalypse domain eager to move. You should know that the Apocalypse domain not only has the 5 major sect alliances, but also many other independent cultivators, as well as small sects and small families that did not participate in the meeting. If these forces are taken out alone, they are naturally not worth mentioning, but if they are gathered together, they are also a force that cannot be underestimated. More importantly, these forces are supported by ancient and powerful existences. These forces alone can consume a lot of the strength of the Qin dynasty. Not to mention that their leaders are all top masters with amazing combat power. This operation of the 5 major sect alliances can be said to have dragged the entire Apocalypse domain into the battle. And the effect is very good. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 260. Haha. Are the 5 major forces in the Apocalypse region finally united? Daqin is finished. We can divide this piece of fat meat. Even if we can't eat meat, we can definitely drink a sip of soup. Yes, the alliance of the 5 major sects is the behemoth of the entire Apocalypse territory. Once they form an alliance, there is no way that the Great Qin dynasty can compare. With such an alliance, what can Great Qin do to resist it? That's right, in this situation, no matter how strong Daqin is, it can't withstand the charge of our coalition forces. Ha ha ha. All forces were excited and excited. Countless people are looking forward to the day when the 2 realms collide. Although Daqin had a record of killing dozens of saints, no one felt any fear at this moment. After all, The only power in the Tianlan region at this time was the Great Qin dynasty. At this time, the Apocalypse territory is an alliance of 5 major sects, and there are no less than 5 forces with the inheritance of the Great Emperor. What's more, if the powerful forces from the Wind Spirit realm join forces, what can De Qin do to resist? With such a lineup, throughout the entire history of the Apocalypse realm, there are only a handful of them, and even worse. The Great Qin royal family will definitely lose. The monks in Tiankai domain are full of confidence and feel that Great Qin will be defeated this time. This time, the Great Qin royal family is destined to be destroyed. The Tianlan territory will change its dynasty, and the Tiankai territory will become the new master. The Great Qin royal family is too arrogant and domineering. If they don't take our Tiankai territory seriously, they will suffer a loss sooner or later. De Qin may be in trouble this time. The end of the Great Qin royal family is coming soon. Countless monks in the Apocalypse domain were talking about each other, each with their own evil intentions and greed in their eyes. Although the territory of the Tianlan territory is not comparable to that of the Tiankai territory, it is definitely not comparable to that of ordinary forces. If Great Qin is destroyed, its territory will definitely be reshuffled, which will definitely be of great benefit to all the forces in the Apocalypse region. Suddenly, the calls became louder and louder. This battle attracted the attention of countless monks in the Apocalypse domain. Under the instigation of the 5 major forces, those forces and casual cultivators who had nothing to do with De Qin finally couldn't help but want to get involved. Countless monks began to gather towards Tianlan territory. Giant airships soared into the sky, breaking through the layers of white clouds, carrying various forces and speeding towards the border between Tiankai territory and Tianlan territory. This time to attack the Qin dynasty, all forces came out in full force. For a time, the earth trembled and the wind and clouds changed. A catastrophe that seems to be sweeping across the entire Tianlan territory is gradually brewing. Apocalypse domain, shaking light holy land. In the sect master's hall, a woman dressed in white, with a beautiful and refined appearance, and an ethereal and fairy-like temperament stood quietly outside the hall, looking up at the sky in the distance. Next to her stood a woman in plain clothes. She was cold and aloof, with an extraordinary temperament. She was like a snow lotus standing proudly on a snow-capped mountain. She was noble and cool, making it difficult to get close to her. The woman in the white dress is clearly the Holy Lord of the Shaking Light Holy Land, and she is also recognized as the most beautiful woman in the Apocalypse domain, named Mu Qingzi. On the other side, the woman in plain clothes is her junior sister and the 3rd elder of the Yaoguang Holy Land, Yu Linglong. The 2 women stood silently for a moment. Senior sister, the Apocalypse Alliance has issued a message inviting all forces in the Apocalypse region to join forces to defeat the Qin dynasty, Yu Linglong suddenly said. The Qin dynasty should indeed be destroyed. Mu Qingzi nodded slightly, and then asked, "What do you think?" Yu Linglong pondered for a moment and said, "Senior sister, do you really want to lead the Shaking Light Holy Land to join the Apocalypse Alliance and attack De Qin?" Mu Qingzi sighed softly after hearing this. "Junior sister, Shen Yaoxi, the saint of the Holy Land of Light, is still locked up in the palace by the Emperor of Qin, and her life and death are unknown. Moreover, the great Qin Emperor named Qin Mu also killed the saint elders of my Yaoguang Holy Land. Do you think there is room for relief between the Yaoguang Holy Land and the great Qin dynasty? This time, the alliance of all forces in the Apocalypse domain is the best opportunity for revenge." Mu Qingzi said quietly, with a hint of hatred and murderous intent in her clear and beautiful eyes. Although she had never met the Emperor of Qin. "But I have heard that he is a lawless, arrogant, and cruel person. No matter how evil a person is, he will definitely die. Because he has too many enemies. What's more, Qin Mu killed their saint elders and imprisoned the saint Shen Yaoxi in the palace. It was said that she was tortured in every possible way and was worse than death. How could she let go of this matter? This time the alliance of the 5 major sects in the Apocalypse region jointly attacked the Great Qin dynasty. How could they miss such an opportunity? Moreover, Yaoguang Holy Land also wanted to seize some resources from the Great Qin dynasty for development. Listening to Mu King's words, Yu Linglong was silent and lowered her head. After she was silent for a moment, she said, "But senior sister, have you ever thought about it, that the Emperor of Qin is a ruthless person who even dares to kill a saint?" Yu Linglong raised her head and stared at Mu Kingze, and said seriously, "I don't want you to be in danger." Mu Kingze smiled, reached out and patted Yu Linglong's shoulder, and said softly, "Silly girl, of course I know that, but, no matter how powerful he is, can he still defeat the Emperor's soldiers? I hope he can show up, so maybe I can have a chance to take revenge myself." The corners of Mu King's mouth curved into a curve that was bright, moving and intoxicating. But underneath that touching look, there was a cold and murderous intent that made people feel chilled all over. Yu Linglong was stunned when she heard this, then her beautiful eyes slightly opened, and her eyes fluctuated for the first time. "Senior sister, are you planning to take the imperial weapon with you?" Yes, Mu Kingze nodded. "No matter how many tricks Qin Mu has, he will only die if he encounters the imperial weapon." Yu Linglong looked at Mu Kingze with a serious face, "But, Master said that it cannot be used unless it is absolutely necessary. And the imperial weapon is the highest foundation of my Yaoguang Holy Land. What if something unexpected happens?" Yu Linglong frowned deeply, worried. "Junior sister, don't worry, this time I will only borrow a ray of the imperial weapon's power to attack Dakin, and I will not take the imperial weapon out of Yaoguang Holy Land. I have been preparing for this for a long time, and there will be no mistakes. Besides, it's not just me. Other holy places will also carry replicas or phantoms of the imperial weapon. There will be no problem." Mu Kingze comforted. But, however, Yu Linglong was still worried. "Okay, it's decided." Mu Kingze waved her jade hand to stop Yu Linglong. Seeing this, Yu Linglong had to close her red lips. "You go back first, I'm going to prepare to go to Dakin," Mu Kingze said softly. Yu Linglong was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Since senior sister has decided, then let's do it. I wish senior sister a successful start and a triumphant return." Mu Kingze smiled lightly, her smile was like a flower, and said, "Well, don't worry, this time, I will definitely twist the head of the Emperor of Dakin off." After that, she turned and left. After she left, Yu Linglong murmured to herself, "I hope your choice is correct." Then, she moved slightly and disappeared directly on the spot. And this situation also happened in other Holy Land sects in Tiankai domain.